Welcome to this new automotive news video for Tuesday, February 24, 2026. And today we're going to talk about Dacia since the new Sandero and the new Duster are selling much less than expected. And sales have started to massively drop almost everywhere in Europe, so together we'll try to explain a bit about why that's happening. We'll talk about Mercedes, which is giving new information about its upcoming Mini G-Class, and about Volvo, which is launching a massive recall, about its electric cars whose batteries can catch fire, but also about Lamborghini, which is simply canceling its future electric model. Meanwhile, over at Stellantis, they're working on a new 100% electric sports car project. And finally, we'll talk about Chery, a Chinese brand that sees the strong comeback of diesel engines in Europe and is trying to grab a share of this market with a new diesel-powered vehicle. I hope the topics I've chosen for today's video will interest you. If that's the case, I'm counting on you to show it, as usual, by leaving a like on this video and boosting it. If the option appears for you, by subscribing for the next ones, and above all, as usual, by leaving a comment where you share your opinion about today's news, especially about Chery's new diesel vehicle. Would you be willing to trust a Chinese brand if it started offering diesel vehicles in Europe, while all European manufacturers had bet on abandoning this type of engine? We're going to start this video by talking a little about Dacia, since Dacia is facing a new big problem. Most of its best-known models, like the Sandero, Duster, and Jogger, are seeing their sales drop completely. In Europe, for example, in January 2026, on a European scale, sales of the Dacia Duster dropped by 41%, with about 8,000 units compared to 14,000 in January 2025. If we look at the French market in detail, which is still the main target for a vehicle like this, it's even worse. With a 45% drop, the number of units sold going from about 3,000 to 1,700. The Jogger saw a 50% drop in sales, but the Jogger is a model that's a bit more niche and less in line with current trends. The Jogger has never sold as well as the Duster or the Sandero. And speaking of the Sandero, it's not doing great either. In France, sales went from 4,916 units in January 2025 to 2,800 units in January 2026. So that's about a 42% drop, and if we look at the European scale, it's a real collapse there too. That's also a 45% drop going from 20,000 to 11,000 units. So what's happening at Dacia? This drop in sales can be explained by quite a few things. The first reason, and it's actually good news for Dacia, is that their new Bigster is selling very well. The Bigster is their large SUV model. There were 6,000 Bigsters registered across Europe in January 2026, which is much more than the 32 in January 2025. But those 32 vehicles were dealership vehicles, for example, even though 6,000 more Bigsters were sold in 2026 than in 2025. For now, that's not enough to fill the gap of about 17,000 fewer vehicles that Dacia sold in January 2026 compared to January 2025. That's still an overall drop of 35% in sales. So obviously, part of this drop can be explained by the fact that the entire European car market has declined, but it only dropped by 3.6%. We're far from Dacia's 35%. The big problem for Dacia, let's not beat around the bush, is that prices have skyrocketed. That's an average price increase of 30% in 5 years. And that doesn't work for a brand like Dacia, whose whole concept is based on offering the cheapest cars possible. So yes, of course, buying a new car in 2026 is much more expensive than in 2021. And that's true, no matter the brand. Prices have increased by an average of 20% in 5 years. For Dacia, it's plus 30%, which is much higher, and that's because the brand wanted to move upmarket. It worked for a while, but it's quite possible they've now hit the limits of that approach, and that to get back to higher sales volumes, they might have to take a step back. About its future models in the coming years, I also wanted to talk to you about Mercedes, which is giving some new information about its upcoming Mini G-Class. They're indeed planning a small 4x4, which will have the G-Class's design style, but will be cheaper and more compact. When Mercedes first talked about this model, they only mentioned a 100% version. But it's now confirmed that, from its launch, this new 4x4 will also be available in a hybrid combustion version, which is the same one found under the hood of the new hybrid CLA, namely a 1.5L turbocharged 4-cylinder engine paired with a 48V hybrid system. This engine, as a reminder, is produced by Ors, which, let's remember, belongs to Geely as well as Renault. By the way, speaking of Geely, let's talk about another one of its brands, since we're going to talk about Volvo, which is organizing a new recall of 40,000 units of its electric cars, the EX30. This concerns the performance versions, but also the long-range versions on which a battery problem has been detected, which can lead to overheating, and, in the most extreme cases, to a vehicle fire. That's unlucky. It happens at just the wrong time. At the moment when Volvo is trying to define its communication about these electric cars, explaining that they are counting on the EX30, among others, to strengthen their position in the European electric vehicle market, So there is a recall. Obviously, everything will be handled by Volvo. This recall, by the way, is going to cost them a few $1,000,000 anyway. While waiting for the affected X30S to return to the dealership, Volvo advises owners not to charge their electric cars above 70%. It's still disappointing to pay extra for the long-range car and not enjoy it. By the way, since we're on electric cars, let's discuss Lamborghini. We rarely discuss them, but this time there's something interesting to share. Lamborghini had been working on its first 100% electric model for several years. It was supposed to be the Lanzador, whose concept was presented in 2023. Back then, manufacturers believed electric car sales would soar and demand would be high, but that didn't happen. And that's clearly the main reason why Lamborghini has just officially announced that it's completely abandoning the idea of making a 100% electric car. The reason for this cancellation was explained by Stefan Winkelmann, who is the director of Lamborghini. He was pretty straightforward about it. He said it's clearly because, and I quote, "nobody wants it." For now, according to him, there is no demand. Almost zero demand. For electric sports cars, wealthy customers prefer to keep investing in sports cars with combustion engines. Big engines, V8S, V10S, V12S, so there is no 100% electric model at Lamborghini for now. Maybe in 5 years that will change, but for now, there are no more in development. Instead, Lamborghini is now working on a new generation of vehicles that will use hybrid engines. Lamborghini is developing, to complete its lineup, a new GT, which in principle should use the 4-liter V8 engines found at Bentley, another brand of the Volkswagen Group. This decision was predictable. It's been several years now that we've known the electric sports car market probably won't exist for a long time. Remember Lotus, which was supposed to develop a 100% electric Elise but never managed to get the model ready. Porsche did the same with the future generations of the Cayman and Boxster, 718. On the Rimac side, which is an electric hypercar brand that also owns Bugatti, a few months ago, the CEO explained that their stocks of electric sports cars were overflowing. While over at Bugatti, there was so much demand from customers that most of the units were sold as soon as pre-sales opened. The only European brands that continue to get involved are Ferrari with its Luce, Alpine with its upcoming electric A110, and Stellantis. Stellantis has confirmed the GTI badge will return for the Peugeot 208 as a fully electric model. And by the way, Opel, another brand from the Stellantis group, just announced that it's developing another 100% electric sports car to compete with Alpine and its A290. A new sporty version of the Corsa, which will be called the GSE and will use the same technical base as the Lancia Ypsilon, which is the same as the one found on the electric 208 GTI and also the same as the sporty versions of the Alfa Romeo Jr., which is the same as the one found on the base of the electric Bart 600 or even the Mach-E GSE. All cars that, except for the 208 GTI, which hasn't been released yet, have been failures. They've been flops. Still, Opel isn't giving up with this new sporty electric Corsa, which will have 280 horsepower and go from 0 to 100 in 6 seconds. I had a diesel station wagon in the early 2000s that wasn't sporty, yet it outperformed this, and the same 54 kW batteries as the Lancia Ypsilon, which should allow it to reach between 350 and 400 km range. WLTP, it's not much, but anyway, if you want to drive far and drive for a long time, you have to go for diesels. Chery understood that well since Chery, a Chinese brand, is developing a new diesel engine pickup truck. Indeed, Chery has noticed that in Europe for the past few months, manufacturers have been slowly but surely coming back to diesel. Just a few weeks ago, Stellantis also announced the arrival of new diesel engines on about 15 models in its diesel pickup range. It's called the KP31, and it will be equipped with a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine paired with a plug-in hybrid system. With this system, Chery is aiming for up to 170 kilometers of range in fully electric mode and a total power output of about 260 horsepower when both engines are combined. For this category of vehicles, pickups are still often purchased by professionals. What is very important are the towing capabilities. And in fact, Chery is announcing a target payload of 1,000 kilograms and a towing capacity of up to 3,000 kilograms. The pickup will have lockable differentials at the front, center, and rear, selectable off-road mode, and a multi-stage transfer case. It will feature both short and long gear ratios for off-road driving. It should have a system similar to Ford's Trail Turn Assist, which allows you to automatically lock the inside rear wheel when making a tight turn off-road. To make the vehicle slide and improve its turning angle, the only things we don't know about it for now are, of course, the price. That will be the big question, and that's what will basically determine whether it will do well or not. And it's the exact list of markets where it will be available. Even though Chery is targeting Europe and expanding here, it's not certain it will be sold in every country. I'm especially thinking about France. Between the weight penalty and the CO2 penalty, it's going to be pretty tough for it to make it, given that the penalties are getting more and more severe. There you go. We've covered these little news updates for February 24, 2026. I hope you found this video interesting. Of course, if that's the case, I'm counting on you to show it, as usual, by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, and possibly supporting through the join button below this one. Thank you for watching this video. See you tomorrow for the next one. Bye.